Welcome everybody to this evening's presentation by the Lyme Disease Resource Center. I'm Maria Malaguti, the Executive Director of the center. And tonight we have Noëlle Janka, who is going to talk about her book called Rebel Healing and explaining a little bit about her career as a health coach. And she is a returning speaker for our center. So welcome back, Noëlle.
Thank you, Maria. It's so good to be back. And I so appreciate what you all do at the LDRC. And it's just always such a treat to be in community with fellow Lyme survivors. So I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight. These are some of the things I was going to talk about. I'm going to try to keep the presentation on the shorter side so that we have lots of time to just have a discussion. I can answer questions, whatever we want to go. And so I thought I'd say a little bit about my own Lyme journey, briefly talk about my professional background, and then say more about why I wrote this book, Rebel Healing, Transforming Ourselves and the Systems That Make Us Sick. I'll briefly touch on the 8 principles of the book. I could spend an hour and a half talking about them all, so we won't do that. But I've picked sort of 4 major themes that I think can be valuable to everybody in their healing journey, some of which may be familiar, some of which may feel new. But they are things that I found that have really supported me in my healing and have supported a lot of my clients in bringing ease and effectiveness to their healing journeys. And then if we're feeling it and we have fun, then maybe I'll lead us through a fun little exercise, but there'll be no pressure to participate. This is a picture that might look familiar or feel familiar to some of you all. This is me lying on the floor at the end of a work day. My Lyme journey started when I was 15 years old. So it's been 24 years in the making. I haven't been super sick that entire time. It's been a bit of an ebb and flow. But it did take me 8 years to get diagnosed, even though I grew up in the very Lyme endemic area of Northern Virginia. I wasn't, and I had, a lot of the telltale symptoms, but like many of us, I was dismissed many times until I finally got to see a Lyme literate doctor in Massachusetts. Most recently, I got a lot better in 2019, but like some other folks I know in our community, got really sick again after getting the first COVID vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And just in the last few months, I have started recovering from that, which feels like a huge blessing, major blessing. And I know people have asked me, every time I've spoken publicly, people always ask me like, what helped you? What worked for you? So I just wanted to say briefly, these are some of the things that have helped me the most in my journey for whatever it's worth. Herbs, biomagnet therapy, the dynamic neural retraining system, or DNRS. And then there's a very specific body worker in South Hadley named Tanya Terrell, who helped me really just in such a huge way. I got a pretty bad tailbone injury around the same time that I got sick when I was a teenager. And what Tanya has helped me understand is that created this sort of whiplash throughout my whole body that messed up my vagus nerve and a lot of my nerves, which made it hard for me to heal, which is why I kept throughout my life have gotten sick and then gotten better and then gotten sick and then gotten better. And so she's helped me repair a lot of the nerve pathways, which I think has set me up to be in a place where I can build successively instead of, riding the roller coaster forever and ever, which I feel very grateful for. But then I think, maybe the bedrock of what has really supported me in my healing is actually intuitive, spiritual, and trauma work. So some of the things and some of the trauma work in particular has been EMDR, core energetics, and different kinds of somatic practices. And so that's part of what led me to write the book, is I really wanted to speak to the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of healing, specifically as it relates to chronic illness, because I think a lot of us in our journeys, we find our way to yoga, we find our way to meditation, we find our way to some of these mind-body practices. But when I was looking for resources, especially as a young person, I didn't see a lot of like, this is what you need if you have chronic illness. There's a lot of great books on science and treatments, physical treatments, but I wanted something to really look at the non-physical aspects. Like, how do we build up our spiritual foundation? How do we, on the emotional piece, how do we even cope with the experience of living with chronic illness and the trauma of that? So I'll say more about that, but wanted to briefly mention it. And then because I was constantly getting sick as a young person, I've done a lot of different things in my life, which I think I feel grateful for at this point. And some of this shows up in my work. So I wanted to mention, I have a background as a grassroots organizer. I'm also a trained yoga teacher, and I've had other jobs along the way, but for the last almost 9 years, I've had my own coaching practice as a holistic career coach for people at the intersection of social justice and chronic illness. So some of my clients are just social justice-y people. Some of my clients are just folks with chronic illness, but a lot of people have a little bit of both in their experience, because that seems to happen, right? We attract the people that have similar experiences to us. So I've done a lot of work with helping folks navigate, okay, how do I survive inside of capitalism as a disabled person whose body can't do the things that most jobs are asking us to do? So that's work that I really, really enjoy doing. And then there's pieces that, are less related to career, which is part of what inspired writing the book as well. So now I get to add published author to my professional background as of September. So why did I take the time to write this book? Some of you probably won't be surprised to hear that it took me nearly 7 years to write it, because it was something that I was doing on top of everything else, right? On top of working, on top of taking care of myself, on top of family obligations. And it was a real practice to keep coming back to it. And what I was trying to do changed over time. So initially, I was really just wanting to share my experience and tell people these are the things that worked for me, so that it was out there in the world for anybody who wanted it. And specifically, like I said, looking at the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of healing when you're living with chronic illness. And I guess I should say too, when I think about healing, I'm not necessarily thinking about getting better, right? Or getting to a place where there's no physical symptoms. The way I think about healing is it's about 30% repair and 70% transformation. And I mean that healing in the personal sense and healing in the collective sense. Because one of the things I was also wanting to do with this book was to help folks see illness and healing in the personal and the collective context at the same time. And I'll say, so part of what I was seeing as somebody who's, who grew up in DC and thought a lot about politics, and trained as a grassroots organizer and worked on political campaigns. And when I was younger, I really thought I wanted to work in politics. So I would, read about policy in my spare time. Huge nerd, it turns out. And one of the things that frustrated me the most about living with Lyme and trying to get well in our medical system was that none of my doctors wanted to address the root cause. They just wanted to do stuff to address my symptoms, or, they wanted to send me to the cardiologist for one thing and the, neurologist for one thing. And I was like, yeah, but like, like, how are we going to fix the underlying, issues? How are we going to get this bacteria out of my body? Like, how are we going to figure this out? And I just felt like it was, I'm sure many people can resonate with this experience. It felt like banging my head against the wall. And I was noticing, it felt like the same thing was happening at the community level, at the state level, at the national level. We were, our elected leaders were creating policies that addressed symptoms, right? Like people being unhoused, and not the causes, right? And I thought, there's something here. There's some connection here between these, these root causes and our seeming disinterest in addressing the root causes. And so I wanted to kind of take it all the way back. Like what are the original issues collectively, and why aren't we addressing them? And so that was one thing that I was looking at. And then I was also frustrated when I was looking for resources for my own healing, that so many books, there's kind of like different categories, right? There's the memoirs, like the Lyme memoirs. I think Katina Macris's is amazing. A lot of the other ones I just couldn't even read because I was like, this is too familiar, I can't. And then there are all these books on how to heal, right? So, if you, and not to say that they're not great books, right? There's a lot of really good information in there. But what I saw for myself and my clients and other, Lyme buddies, was that we would do everything in the books, or we would do everything that these wellness influencers or doctors or whoever, we would do all the things, but then we wouldn't get better, or we would get well and get sick again. And I wanted somebody to point out that we are healing in a context that does not privilege healing, right? We are living in a society in which our well-being is not a priority, right? And so going back to the root cause thing, I think the root cause of our social problems, the root cause of having the healthcare system that we have, the root cause of 60% of people in America having health challenges, is our history of the United States being built on slavery and genocide. So that might seem like a huge leap, but I did a lot of research to explore this, like especially in the medical system. If you look at the history of medicine and how what they called root and herb healers, in the early colonial times, there were amazing healers, mostly women, who were of all races and backgrounds, who were doing really cool work combining the healing traditions of people from Africa, indigenous people on Turtle Island, and bringing their European healing knowledge. And over time, those people got systematically pushed out of being able to heal folks, as white guys decided that medicine was going to be something that was practiced a particular way and that they charged money for. So that's just one small example of how our history leads us to where we are today. And I talk about that a lot more in the book, but I think it's important for us to understand that, in part because we can see then with great clarity that our illness is not our fault, right? And it isn't entirely on us that we're sick. In a lot of cases, I think it's mostly not on us that we're sick. It's actually that we're living in a sick system. And also it's not on us completely as individuals to heal, right? Because if the collective is sick, then we need to not just heal ourselves, but heal the collective. And so part of what this book is offering, or hopefully, is that we can heal ourselves and heal the collective at the same time. So that's part of what I was trying to do. And then I could have written more broadly about healing, but I really wanted to write something for our people, for our family, for our community. And so the book is really written with chronic illness in mind. And then even more specifically, I think those of us with invisible illness that's not well understood and that doesn't have clear treatment protocols. So that's Lyme, long COVID, ME/CFS, and, you know, the other things that fall under our umbrella that are comorbidities of those conditions. And the feedback that I've gotten so far is that a lot of folks have felt really seen and heard by the book, which was my intention. So that feels really good. And so I just lastly want to say that another hope I had for this book was that it could be a connection point for people to find each other, and the book might serve as a community empowerment tool, that folks could read it together in book clubs, that folks could decide to just read it together as friends, do some of the exercises together, and build resiliency and resource together. Because another thing that I have found to be true about our community is that we are so brilliant and so resourceful because we have figured out how to survive and thrive in many cases inside of a system that that isn't built to care for us, right? Our system isn't built for chronic conditions. We're supposed to get sick and get better and go on with our lives and be productive. But so many of us have figured out how to, you know, find joy and make a living and have families and have community, even while living with health challenges. And I'm constantly amazed by how much our community is able to offer, even with such little capacity. And I think that's in part a necessity because we've had to figure out how to care for ourselves and care for each other. But I also think that it makes us uniquely qualified to support other people, to support non-sick people, to support non-disabled people, because we have this knowledge and experience that they don't have. So my other hope is that by more folks working on the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of healing, they build their own resiliency, are able to do more for themselves and more for their communities, and are able to be leaders in creating a different experience for all of us. I know it's a really big vision, but I think you all might get it. So I wanted to put it out there. And I'm not going to talk about all of these because, like I said, we don't have that much time, but I wanted to give you all an idea of kind of the soul of the book. The soul of the book being these 8 principles. So the book kind of has 3 parts. One part is, you know, these are some things that you can do right now to support yourself in your healing. The middle section is the context piece, like why are we all sick and what can we do about it? And then the third piece is, given this context, given where we're at, what are the things that you can do to support yourself and your community in healing? And so that's where these principles come in. And I don't claim that they are the end all be all by any means. They come from themes that I noticed in the community, in my own journey and in the journey of my friends and my clients. And so their healing is change. Healing is feeling. Healing is embodiment, which is being in your body, being fully present in your body. Healing is loving all of yourself. Healing is training your brain to be your ally. Healing is listening and honoring your truth. Healing happens in community. And healing makes liberation possible. So I think these things kind of all intersect and all support each other. I will say just a couple of things. So a big piece of another theme that runs through the book is trauma and the importance of healing our trauma personally and collectively. And I think that's important not only for our physical healing, but it also changes the way that we show up in the world for ourselves and each other. So like another thing that I advocate for in the book is enrolling support, finding your community, finding your people that really get it. But a lot of us have trauma that lives in our systems that makes it really hard for us to trust other people. So sometimes we need to do that healing work before we can actually build the community that we want, or before we can actually feel the love that people are trying to give us, right? So that's just an example of kind of how these things fit together and reinforce each other. And number 5, healing is training your brain to be your ally. So one of the things I talk about in the book is brain retraining, which I'm sure many of you have dabbled in. It's become quite popular in the last decade or so. And I think it's like when I say the mental aspect of healing, that's part of what I'm talking about. And the way that I think about the brain is it's like a puppy, right? If you train it really well, you can have a beautiful relationship together. If you don't, it might just pee all over the floor and do unpredictable things all the time. And so the way that works, you know, in reality in the brain is constant worry, your brain, you know, internal conversations that get in the way of you doing things that you know are really good for you, different, you know, mental obstacles that come up. And so between programs, like brain retraining programs for people with chronic illness and some of what I do as a coach and Buddhist mind training principles, meditation, there's so much that we can do to get our brain calmed down to the point that it really enforces our healing. It's like getting the brain on board for the other healing work that we're doing. So that's a little bit more about a couple of these, just to give you a teaser. And I just want to check where we are on time here. Okay, great. So you can read the book if you want, learn more about all 8 of those principles and the other things that I'm talking about. But I think these are the 4 things that really supported me and have supported my clients and my chronic illness buddies in really bringing ease to the healing experience, bringing ease to the experience of living with chronic illness, and just generally helping everything go a little more smoothly. And I mentioned trauma. I don't know if any of you all follow Jenny Grover. She used to be explicitly a chronic illness coach. Now she's a wellness coach for makers, in case any of you are quilters or makers of other flavors. She's just incredible and so wise, and has been on the healing path even longer than I have. And we were agreeing, we were like, yeah, when we decided to get support in healing trauma, that's when everything changed for us. Like that's when the physical symptoms got way easier. That's when life got sweeter and more joyful. Like that was the most important thing that we did in our healing. We have a conversation on Instagram, if you want to check it out, from a couple months ago. We were talking about the book, but we agreed that trauma healing was like the number one. And I can talk more about what that might look like if folks are interested in the Q&A. And the second thing is making friends with your nervous system. So this picture that I put up here is an old drawing of the nervous system. But I think it's safe to say that all of us with chronic illness, whether it's Lyme or something else, are dealing with some amount of chronic nervous system dysregulation. And for me, the more that I learned about the nervous system, the more that I learned about polyvagal theory, which helps explain how the nervous system works, and the more I paid attention to my own nervous system and what would get me more activated or less activated, the more things got a little bit easier for me. And my own experience with brain retraining, with the dynamic neural retraining system, was really huge. You know, it helped me with chemical sensitivity, sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, chronic anxiety, sleep. It was such a game changer. It just launched me into this whole other place that I think made it possible for so much other healing to happen in the future. There's so much happening right now in the field of somatics. You know, there's more and more therapists that also offer somatic work. And I think that's, it's maybe not a fit for everyone all the time, but something that can be really useful to everyone at some point in their healing journey. And yoga and breath work are also really great ways to access nervous system regulation and nervous system tracking. So I think a lot of people, when they think about the nervous system, they think about, or even this is something that people talk about, being upregulated all the time, being in fight or flight. But I think that a lot of us are actually stuck in the opposite place, in shutdown collapse. And then a lot of us also ping pong between the two. And so I think it can be really useful to understand where we are on any given day and where our bodies like to go when things get hard. So I can say more about that too, but that, again, has been such a game changer for me and folks in my community. And it's something that I read about in the book. Okay, number 3 is about intuition. And so I know people throw intuition around a lot, but I do a lot of work with my clients to support them to be able to find their intuition and listen to it and trust it. Because again, something like different kinds of trauma can make it hard for us to access our intuition and make it really hard for us to trust our gut, when we get intuitive hits. But I think the biggest thing I want to say about it is the more that we can try and practice trying to ask ourselves information instead of going outwards for it, it's just such a beautiful practice to be in. Even if it takes years to get to the point where it feels useful, I think it's a very worthy practice and worthy investigation. For me, it's just been like, I don't know, maybe, I know I was saying trauma healing was the number one thing, but maybe intuition is the number one thing. It's hard to decide. But I, like when I got the first COVID vaccine, I didn't consult my intuition before I did it. And I am certain that if I had, then I would have made a different choice and maybe wouldn't have gotten sick. Because when I do ask myself about any decision that I'm trying to make and I get an answer and I listen to it, life is just so much better and so much sweeter. But like I said, it's a practice, right? So even though I believe in it so much, I'm still not doing it 100% of the time, but I'm working on it. But I think one of the ways I think about intuition is it's like a algorithm that we can consult, that the data that it's consulting is not just from our own bodies and our own experience, but from the experience of our ancestors, from just this like huge wealth of human and cellular knowledge. And we only actually use, like on any given day, we only actually use our cognitive mind 2 to 5% of the time. 98% of the time, or 95% of the time, we're just operating on instinct with everything else that we're doing. And so, why wouldn't you want to consult that body of knowledge is one way that you could think about it. And then number 4 is about building connection. So that's connection to other people, but also connection to the earth, connection to your body, and connection to ancestors and connection to the divine. And there's more about all of that in the book. But one of the reasons it's in there, one of the reasons I mention it is because I believe that isolation is one of the worst parts about living with health challenges. And I think the isolation makes everything worse. And when we can, emotionally, physically, and otherwise, and when we can find points of connection, even if it's, maybe it's our neighbor, maybe it's a rock in our neighborhood, maybe it's a bird. I think that there's so many ways for us to be reminded that we are part of a larger, beautiful, powerful, ancient ecosystem. And so I think that I've seen again and again in working with clients that when folks rebuild a sense of connection, even if it's whether it's with people or non-human entities, it's so much easier for them to get through the harder things. And it's so much easier for them to, in moments of feeling isolated, remember that they're not actually alone. So I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Do you folks feel like they want to do an exercise Maybe you can give me a virtual thumbs up or put something in the chat, because we could also skip it, but I just wanted to put it out there. It's just a short breathing exercise. Okay, we have one raised hand. Got a thumbs up. All right, we can give it a try. I promise it's really short. So if it feels okay, you might close your eyes for this exercise, because you don't need to see me. You can just listen to me. If I think I will describe it as if it's something that you can visualize, but I know some people have trouble with visualization. So if that's true, then I want to invite you to focus on the sensation of it. And so all we're going to be doing is inhaling and exhaling. And so if I'm going to sort of offer two options here. So if you right now feel tired, heavy, sluggish, brain foggy, then I want you to focus on the inhale. And if you are feeling like anxious, activated, fearful, jumpy, any of those things, then I want you to focus on the exhale. And when I say focus, I mean slightly lengthen. Excuse me. So yeah, if you're feeling tired, lengthen the inhale. If you're feeling jumpy, lengthen the exhale. And so one of the ways that I like to think about this is like there's a bouncy ball. And when the ball hits the ground and bounces back up, then you're going to inhale, and you're going to imagine there's a lot of buoyancy in that inhale. And then eventually the ball comes back down, and that's the exhale. And so if you want to emphasize the inhale, then you like put your attention on the ball bouncing up as you inhale, and see if maybe the ball bounces a little higher with each breath. And then as you exhale, imagine that the ball coming back down, it just kind of slows down into slow motion. And so I'm going to invite you to do this for the next 3 breaths, breathing in and breathing out. And you just get to decide whether you focus on the inhale or the exhale. And that's it. And you might just like sort of check in with your body for a second and notice, like, do you feel any different? Because I know for me, I tend towards what in polyvagal theory is called shutdown collapse. I tend towards being really frozen. My body will get really heavy. I'll feel really fatigued, really tired. And just literally 1 minute, 1.5 minutes of the bouncy ball breathing, focusing on the inhale, on a really like lengthening the inhale, a more buoyant inhale. And I'm like good to go. My brain's working. I feel energized. I'm not like ready to run a marathon or anything, but I actually feel like a functional human being. Whereas a few minutes ago, I might've felt like everything was impossible. So I just want to offer that to you all, because I think it's really simple and can be really powerful. So I think that's all I have to say. And so just some contact info here. I'm, on social media. You can find me there. I have a website. You can find me there. The book is available wherever books are sold online. It's also, there's one copy in the CW Mars library system. So you can get it there if you're a library person and you're local. It's also in some libraries in Colorado and other places. So it's always worth asking your library if they have it. And then I've been working very hard to record the audiobook, because I know for a lot of folks in our community, reading is, for different reasons, not accessible. I couldn't read personally for like a decade. So that the audiobook option will be out in 2024. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to you, Maria and Nellie. Thank you.
Thank you, Noelle. That was really wonderful. And the breathing exercise, I was feeling very sluggish at the end of the day, and now I feel more alert. And that was a very easy exercise to do. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Questions from the audience. And you can either type in or raise your hand virtually. Anyone have questions for Noelle?
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about more than just the book if folks have other questions.
Angel, on the phone, it's *6 if you'd like to unmute. Oh, don't be shy. We have a very quiet crowd tonight.
I can get the question ball rolling here. Noelle, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your coaching practice too, because I'm curious if like some of the work you do there might be of benefit to some of the folks listening in tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Nellie. Yeah, so I'm thinking about a client session that I had today with somebody who initially came to me for support with a job transition, but and this happens a lot. It turns out that we are working much more on really basic foundational stuff. That seems to have been true since COVID. People come to me saying, I want to try to find a new job, but then we end up working on, okay, but how do you actually take care of yourself? And what's in the way of you taking care of yourself? Because even folks who, don't have health challenges, we receive a lot of conditioning that makes it hard for us to take care of ourselves and our bodies. And I think that for those of us with health challenges and who have had health challenges for many years, there's ways in which we can be really good at taking care of our bodies, but we have maybe neglected other things like hobbies or things that we love. I remember I did a visioning workshop with you all years ago, and somebody said, I don't even know what I want anymore. I don't even know what I love. Like, I don't even have access to that anymore. And that's really common for people in our community, because we're just spend years trying to survive and trying to figure out how to get better. And it's like, who has time for painting or anything, that isn't related to survival and healing? So we end up working on that a lot too, like not just how do you find what you love again and how do you make space for it, but how do you remove the internal blocks to that? And sometimes that looks like talking about it and, supporting people to see where they might be getting in their own way. Sometimes it's consulting the body. And like in the session that I did with a client today, we were doing visualization, and she was kind of describing these different parts of herself that felt like they were fighting each other and making it hard for her to do what she wanted to do. And so I have different exercises that folks can work with to figure out what's going on and then figure out how to make changes so that they have more access and more ability to do the things that really resource them, that really bring them joy.
I was wondering, a lot of our clients have financial blocks to accessing some of the DNRS or somatic healing. Do you have suggestions for them of free resources, low-cost resources, or even therapists who are engaging with that kind of tool?
Yeah. Well, the one cool thing about sort of somatics and brain retraining getting so big is that there's lots of new people getting trained in it. And so there's actually, and I can help folks find these people. There's, baby practitioners, new practitioners looking for people to practice with. So that can be a nice way for folks to get low cost support. There's also, I found this to be true in Massachusetts. I can't speak for other places, but there are practitioners, therapists, body workers, and otherwise who will take insurance for a particular thing, but they practice these other things too. So it might be that somebody, is a therapist and they take insurance, but they've been trained in somatic work too. So, and these are people, I'm talking about people that take Mass Health. There's folks that are trained in physical therapy, but they'll also do cranial sacral and bill it as physical therapy. So it's, it can take a little bit more networking, try to like finding the right people. But I think a lot of us are really good at that, like hooking each other up with the right people. I think that's one of the most important things, is to just ask around and to keep asking. There's also there's organizations forming that do really accessible somatic work, and also for specific people with specific identities and specific communities. So I can put it in the chat. There's a place called TEI, the Embodiment Institute. They do a lot of really cool free and low-cost programming online, and somatic programming. I'm trying to think of what else. In terms of the brain retraining, yeah, I'm actually not sure how DNRS is distributing itself right now. It used to be DVDs.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people can't afford to access something like that. But I do know that type of neuroplasticity brain retraining is gaining popularity. And just wondering if you know of other organizations that might have something that's more affordable.
Yeah, I mean, Primal Trust seems to be the most popular one these days. It's definitely not cheap. I think it's more expensive than DNRS, unfortunately. But I mean, there's books that people can get at the library as a place to start. So John Sarno's work, Joe Dispenza's work. There's an incredible book called The Woman Who Changed Her Brain by Barbara Arrowsmith Young. That doesn't necessarily tell you what to do, but it kind of can help somebody get in the mindset of like, I can change my brain. Like this is gonna change. This is possible. There's people out there who can help me. And there's an institute associated with that book. It's less around chronic illness, more around folks with learning disabilities, but there might be some overlap for some people. And I believe you can get scholarships to attend there. And yeah, there are multiple communities online of people who are offering their own brain retraining programs that I think are significantly less expensive than DNRS and Primal Trust. So folks can reach out to me if they want links to those resources.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question.
Anyone else? Mabella, I see you've unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, it's just that listening to your talk, Noëlle, it sparked an interest in getting the book and reading it because you not only are you dealing with a person, but you're also dealing with the systemic approach to how our environment contribute. And like you, I like the phrase you said, it's not your fault you got Lyme. And so yes, I was listening a lot of interesting comments that you gave. So I'm interested in getting the book or finding the book so I can read it, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll be excited to hear what you think of it. Yeah, and I wanted to say too, Maria, if if you think it's useful, I'd be happy to donate some books to the organization, sort of like as a lending library for anyone who might not be able to buy the book or get it at the library.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will, I meant to say this earlier, I will be looking for some early listeners for the audiobook. So if you want to access the draft version of the audiobook for free, send me an email and I'll make sure that you get it.
And just so people know, we do still have our lending library, now located in my home office. But we do still have different topics, and you can reach out to the center if you'd like to borrow one of them.
That's great.
So Noëlle, thank you. This has been a really wonderful evening and very informative. Very excited about the audio version. I've been having trouble reading lately and getting a lot of books on tapes rather than having to strain. So I appreciate that you're making that effort to get that out quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a treat to be with you all.
I actually just wanted to pop in one more question about just do you have like any particular resources when you're talking about like building community, you know, and having more of that? And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, there is a whole chapter on it in the book. I was just like, maybe I should read some of that, but it might take me too long to find it. But one of the things that I'm also a career coach, right? So I talk to people a lot about building networks of support. And what I've seen is that even folks who are completely bedbound, can't leave the house, have found ways to build just like really vibrant and supportive networks of people through online forums or through social media. So, and sometimes I know folks can get discouraged, like, and with good reason, right? I mean, I think a lot of us have probably who've been in the game for a while have seen people get divorced, people whose parents check out, people whose kids, don't want to talk to them anymore, because so many people don't understand the experience of illness, and it can create a lot of strife in relationship. But I have seen folks who say, like, I don't have anybody and I don't have the spoons to meet new people, actually create and build community. So I think that it takes a certain amount of will, right? But I think that one of the first things we can do is get clear on who we're trying to connect with. And I think a place to start for everyone in our community is finding other Lyme folks, which is something that can even be done, through the support group that you run, Nellie, or through the organization. Like I had my dearest and most beloved Lyme buddy is somebody who contacted a leader of support group and was like, I don't really want to go to support group. It's not really my thing, but do you know other people my age who have Lyme who I can talk to? And that was Carrie Lang, who probably a lot of you know. And Carrie connected me with my friend who is, we're 10 years in and just love each other so much and probably never would have met otherwise. But I think it's just so important for us to have people in our lives who really get it, people who can laugh with us at the absurdity of this experience, people who we can call and cry with after a crappy doctor's appointment, because so many people just don't understand. And I just think that, if somebody comes to me and they're like, I don't really have any chronic illness buddies, like part of me is like, what are you doing? Like, that's where you should start. But another approach that I offer in the book is to write to sort of build yourself a support dream team. So some of you might have heard of this idea that if you're trying to find a job or start a business, you build a personal board of directors. And the idea is you build your personal board of directors for your healing or for surviving your chronic illness experience, however you want to frame it for yourself. And you start to think, okay, like if everything was possible and there was no possibility of failure or no possibility of pissing people off, what would I really love to have in terms of support in my life? So, this reminds me of what we were talking about, Maria, before we got on the call. Like, I'd love somebody to do food prep with me. I'd love somebody to help me do my laundry. I'd love somebody to take me to the movies once a month. I'd love somebody to just come and sit with me while I knit every 2 weeks or something like that. And really just let yourself dream what you would most love as a starting point. And then, you might like sleep on it or let it sit for a week and then come back to it and see, okay, is there anybody in my life who might actually be willing to do some of these things? And starting with the folks that feel like an easier ask, maybe, is a good place to start. And then, there might be people there might be roles in your list for which you don't have particular people. And then that's a place where you can start to ask around, like ask around in your communities or post in the local Lyme group or post on Facebook, like, hey, does anybody know somebody who might want to go to the movies with me once a month? I love horror movies. Who else loves horror movies? You see people do these kinds of things in other forms too, right? Like in Queer Exchange in Western Mass, you see people say things like, I want to go to Sephora, but I'm scared because, I'm newly a gay man. Like, who wants to come with me? And lots of people will be like, I want to come. And I think that happens in our community too. And I really do believe that building that kind of support and that kind of community is possible for everybody. So those are a few thoughts.
Wonderful, thank you. It's something that does come up a lot in support groups where people are feeling really lonely, feeling really isolated, and like how do I even start with that? So I appreciate you sharing some of the ideas and resources you have in your book.
Yeah, you bet. And I don't want to brush it off like it's all easy to do, right? And I know like I'm more extroverted than other people. It can be more challenging for folks, but I really want to invite people to be brave and courageous, because I think that kind of where we are in time, I think a lot of people are still sort of like slithering out of what maybe they haven't been physically in lockdown, but sort of mentally and emotionally in lockdown since COVID put us there. And I think people, like, everybody's lonely. Everybody's looking for more people to hang out with. Lots of people are looking for support and new relationships. So I think there's actually a huge opportunity here for folks to build relationships even outside of the chronic illness community. And I think folks will be surprised by the response that they get just by being brave and reaching out to one person, like, hey, do you want to talk to me? Hey, do you want to try this with me? I've been seeing that in my own life and in my community too. But yeah, great question, Nellie. Thank you.
It does take a certain amount of bravery to take that first step. And I know in our groups, that question comes up. I'm all alone. What do I do? Where do I start? And a lot of times people get stuck at, I'm not brave enough, or I can't ask that question. Trying to get people to tap into their own inner strength is difficult.
Yeah, and I think it takes time, right? It might be something that needs to be suggested to us a few times before we feel brave enough to do it. But I think reaching out to other sick folks is a great place to start, because we're all in the same boat for the most part. So I think in some ways we're more likely to say yes to each other. Yeah.
Other questions from the group? Anyone?
Hello?
Hi, Angel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I'm having a little bit of a hearing problem, but I want to be brave and see if I'm asking a question on something I actually heard. After talking about the woman who changed her brain book, something I thought was brought up about there's a center that helps people with learning difficulties. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, it was started by the author of that book, Barbara Arrowsmith Young. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but I can try to look it up right now. I think it's in Canada. Yeah, it's the Arrowsmith School in Toronto.
Arrowsmith School, Toronto. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, they do really cool work.
Anyone else? Nellie, any other questions?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's plenty that I'd love to talk more with you about, Noëlle, because I also like to really bring in the piece of like looking at the larger societal context in which we're living and how that impacts us and our experiences of illness and how we're treated. And looking at ableism and navigating being in a place of an invisible disability and what that brings up, because so many of us here with Lyme and with other chronic illnesses, they are often invisible. And so like you get all of that, you look great, and it's like, thanks, I feel like shit. So it sounds like that's something that you talk about in the book a fair amount too. So I don't know if you want to mention that a little, like say anything more about that.
About the systemic piece and
yeah. Any further thoughts you have on that?
Well, first I just want to say happy to talk to you more about it anytime. Yeah, it's like I wrote the book, but I feel like it's an ongoing conversation and something in a moving target and something that we can always talk more about as a community. But yeah, I think what I've found in my coaching work, because I was trained in this particular coaching model that's based on Buddhist mind training. And the idea is you help folks see where they're getting in their own way. They see a particular like internal conversation and you can help them see that that's not true. And then when they see it's not true, you can look at, okay, like what is actually true? What do you want to do about it? Blah, blah, blah. But what I found is that when certain internal conversations came up and we could label them as ableism, as white supremacy, as sexism, then it was that much easier for folks to say, that conversation is not me. It's not the truth. That's just social conditioning. And it's that much easier for them to follow through on what's actually true for them. And so often social conditioning is part of what gets in the way of people doing what they know they need to do for their healing, whether that's get out of a toxic relationship, change their job, rest more, or whatever it is. And so that's part of how I got started thinking about that, was seeing how much it helped folks to come back to what's really true for them and be able to follow through on that. So that's definitely one piece of it. And I think that in some ways, ableism is like still just like really not talked about very much. right? Like it's, you know, I'm surprised. I've done some work in the sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and I'm shocked by how often ableism is completely left out of that conversation and disability is completely left out of that conversation. I'm just like, hello, excuse me. Like in some of the jobs that I've had with organizations, I've been the one to sit everybody down and be like, let's talk about disability and ableism and including disabled people. And these are like one of those institutions I worked for was Harvard, right? Presumably, like they're like a leader in international higher education. So they're supposed to have their poop in a group, so to speak, on that kind of stuff. And my particular department totally did not. So, and this was just a couple years ago. So it's a topic that I think is really important for us to unpack ourselves, being so impacted by it. And, you know, if and when we have the spoons, I think we have a lot to offer able-bodied people in sort of checking themselves and noticing when they're being really ableist. And it's something that as a community, we can work on more together. I could talk about it forever, but that's my rant on it for today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. And just Marcy, you asked about the audiobook. Yeah, joining my newsletter, which only comes out once a month, is the best way to be alerted on when the audiobook comes out and where you can get it. And like I said, I think that'll be sometime in March.
Natalie has a question.
Hi, I was wanting to know a little bit more about the book. Does it include coaching type things or I mean, exercise type things to help you, or is it more informational?
Good question. It's both. So every section has reflection questions in it. So it has a little bit of a workbook quality, which, you know, is optional, but there. And then there are many exercises in the first and the third section of the book. Breathing exercises, yoga stuff, exercises for nervous system regulation, exercises for figuring out what your own vision is for your healing, and again, like how you want to build support around that. So it's definitely chock full of exercises.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then there's some videos on my website too, free trainings. And I have some stuff on YouTube as well that folks can check out.
So we can send links to different things for the folks who've attended tonight. We can email you, and Angel will send some stuff in the mail.
Great. Yeah, and I really welcome follow-up questions if folks want to email me after this with anything else that comes up. I can put my email in the chat. And Angel, my website's pretty easy to find, noellejanka.com.
Do you do phone consults as well?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Some of our clients don't do Zoom, don't do a lot of web.
Yeah, I personally try to do as much of my work on the phone as possible for my own health. So I'm here for that.
Anyone else? Questions, final questions? I think that's it, Noëlle. thank you so much for sharing your book and your coaching. Really wonderful to have you back again after so long. And so happy we could be here for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So nice to be with you all. And hopefully it's not the last time. And look forward to future conversations, and just wishing everybody, you know, as much wellness as possible and many blessings in 2024.